Hello students, and welcome to your first video on lesson 8.6, where we are going to try to be factoring just like we were in 8-5, but we're going to be factoring polynomials, specifically quadratic trinomials that have a value in front of the x squared term, okay? A value in front of the x squared term, which we call a coefficient, all right? It's important to know that when the quadratic function that we want to factor has a coefficient in front of the x squared term, okay, if it's in the front, factoring it becomes much more difficult. All right, so here's an example for you. We have 6x squared plus 13x plus 5. Okay, so again, what we have to notice is this number right here. Okay, that number. That 6 in front of my x squared term makes this process quite a bit more complicated, okay? Quite a bit more complicated. So we're going to use what we call the window method, okay? Now the window method breaks down the process of factoring a quadratic trinomial like this into things, or into steps I think we can handle, okay? It uses what I call a window to sort of organize and arrange things, okay? So when we make a window, we just basically make an old school looking window, a square with a plus in it, okay? So we do that. If you want to, you can go ahead and put a little flower box down here on the bottom, and you can, grow some flowers in there and go, there's a flower, and then maybe a violet one, it's okay. I'm kidding, you don't have to put the flowers on there, but we're not gonna put the planter box either. So we start with a window, all right? We start with a box, we start with the plus like this. Okay, we don't need the flowers. Okay, so we start with one of these guys. And what we do is we put the first term of the polynomial, and by that I mean the x squared term, in this case 6x squared, we put it in the top left-hand box of our window, okay? 6x squared goes in the top left box. The last term of the polynomial, which in this case is the 5, right? This 5 is at the very end. Ooh, yep, that guy right there. That's kind of cool. Okay, so this 5 goes in the bottom right box. So we have 6x squared here, and we have the 5 here, okay? So what we then do is we take those two things and we multiply them together, because this box is very special. Okay, the diagonals, meaning this box multiplied by this box, has to be equal to this box multiplied by this box. Okay, now those two boxes, we don't have anything in there yet, but we're going to very shortly. All right, so what we do is we multiply the two boxes together that we filled in, 6x squared times 5. 6x squared multiplied by 5, okay? So we do 6x squared multiplied by 5. And the x squared is not going to change here because there's no other x's to multiply, but 6 times 5 makes 30. Okay, so I get 30x squared, okay? So these two empty boxes that I have here and here, they have to multiply together to make 30x squared, because like I said, these two boxes multiplied together has to be equal to these two boxes multiplied together, all right? So 6x squared times 5 is 30x squared. So I need them to be 30x squared. Okay, now what we also need to keep in mind is that to fill in this window, to fill in these 4 boxes, I'm just using the stuff from my polynomial. Okay, so if you remember my polynomial, it was 6x squared plus 13x plus 5. Okay, 6x squared plus 13x plus 5. It was this guy, and I'm going to put a little squared. A little bit of squared here. Okay, put a little squared. So I had this polynomial, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take these pieces and put them in these boxes. Now I've already put the 6x squareds here, right? So those are sort of done with. I'm done with this. Put them in there. I'm also done with this because I put that in there as well. So my other two boxes here, okay, these two boxes that I have not yet filled in, this guy right here, this one, this one. These together need to be my 13x's. Okay, so I'm going to actually do them in blue. My 13x's need to go into these two spots. Okay, these two blanks together need to be 13x total. when I add them together. If I were to put those two together, it has to be a total of 13x, all right? So I could put like 7x's here and 6x's there. I could put like 10x's here and 3x's here, or 5 and 8, or whatever. I can split up my 13x to these two boxes, okay? So what we have to realize now is because I need these two boxes to together total up to 13, and I already talked about them needing to multiply to be 30x squareds, we need two numbers that add up to be 13 and they multiply to be 30. Now, those phrases should sound familiar, right? That's what we were doing in our last video, right? We were talking about how do we find numbers that multiply to make this and add up to make this, and that's how we found our factors, right? So it's sort of similar in this case. We just have to do a little bit of work in order to find what numbers are we actually looking for, okay? So when we multiply these together, 6 times 5, that immediately tells me I need two numbers that multiply to make 30, because it's 6 and 5, okay? I need two numbers that multiply to make 30. And then this middle number from my original polynomial tells me how many x's I have to work with. That tells me the number that they need to add to. So they need to add up to be this middle number, and they need to multiply now to be 6 times 5, which is 30. They need to multiply to 30. So the question is, what two numbers add up to be 13 and multiply to be 30? Well, if we do this in the same way that we did in our last video, let's just start listing out things that could multiply to make 30, right? And see if they add together to be 13. So let's do 1 and 30. Do those add up to 13? No. 2 times 15 would be 30. Do those add up to 13? No. 3 times 10, do those add up to 13? Yes, they do. So there's my two numbers. So when I find the two numbers that I want that add to 13, multiply to 30, I'm going to put one of each of them into these boxes. So right here, I'm going to put 10, okay? And down here, I'm going to put 3. Now, it's also important to know that because of the x squared, each of these needs to get an x, okay? So it's 10x's here, and it's 3x's down here. All right, it's 10x's and it's 3x's. It's 10x's and it's 3x's. Okay, 10x's and 3x's. So let's look at another example where we have some negatives involved, okay, and see how that affects our window. If I were to give you guys the quadratic trinomial, let's say 3x squared plus 4x minus 20. Yeah, that'll work. 3x squared plus 4x minus 20. And I'm going to put the squared on here. Okay, so I now have this polynomial. And all we're working on today in this video, you guys, is filling in our windows. We're going to talk about how to finish the factoring at a later time, okay? In our next video, we're going to talk about how we take these full windows, these boxes that we filled in, and how they tell us the factored form, the two sets of parentheses that we need to deal with, okay? So let's take this polynomial and let's try to make a window. So if I make my window, well, it's probably easiest just to do this. If I just do this and do this, there you go. So if I make my window and I put in the two pieces that I know and I know where they go, remember that it's the 3x squared goes in this top left box, 3x squared. And now I'm going to put a minus 20 or negative 20 down in this box down here. Okay, a minus 20 or negative 20. So now I'm looking for what goes in these other two, right? But in order to find that, I need to know, what do these two boxes multiplied together equal? Well, they equal negative 60. right? A 3 times a negative 20 is negative 60, and then they have an x squared. So negative 60 is really this number that I'm focused on. Okay, negative 60 is the number I'm focused on. I need whatever's in these two boxes, I need them to multiply to be a negative 60. Okay, I need them to be a negative 60. Now, in order for them to be a negative 60, one of them is going to need to be a negative. And one of them is going to need to be a positive, because a negative times a positive is the only way I can get a negative answer, right? So I know they need to multiply to this negative 60. I need them to add together to be this positive 4 from the middle of my polynomial, okay? I need them to multiply to be the same as these two multiply together. I need them to add to be the middle piece from my polynomial. So they need to add up to positive 4, okay? Add up to positive 4. So I need to find two numbers that multiply to make negative 60 and add up to make positive 4. So I'm going to start listing out possibilities over here that might multiply to 60, and then we can talk about making one of them negative. Now, another thing to remember from our last video is when we have one positive and one negative, how do we decide which one is bigger or which one's which? And that, remember, comes from this symbol right here. Because they need to add to be a positive, my bigger number needs to be positive, okay? So my options for multiplying to 60, 1 comma 60, right? Now, if I made the 1 negative because it's smaller, are those going to add up to be 4? Negative 1 plus 60? No way. What about negative 2 and 30? No way. That's going to be 28. Too big. Okay, what about negative 3 and 20, right? That's what I had sort of here. Are those going to add up to 4? No, they're not going to add up to 4. They're going to add up to 17. What about, let's see, other things that could multiply to 60? And again, if you're not sure, you can just try 60 divided by different numbers. Like 60 divided by negative 4 is going to give me 15. So negative 4 and 15, do those add together to be 4? No, they add up to be 11. So we got to keep going. Okay. Negative 5. This one's got a lot of options. Negative 5 times 12. Negative 5 times 12 would be 60. Are those going to add up to 4? No, they add up to 7. So we're getting closer at least. Negative 6 can be multiplied by 10. Negative 6 times 10 would be negative 60. Do those add up to 4? Negative 6 plus 10. Yeah, they do add up to 4. So there's my two numbers. I found them. It's a negative 6 and a positive 10. So I'm going to put those into my window. Negative 6, that gets an x, of course. It's important to remember that both the numbers you're looking for are going to get an x. And then down here, it's going to be 10. And that's also going to get an x. Okay, and now this is this polynomial put into my window that I'm then going to use to factor. Okay, I'm then going to use to factor. So when things have negative signs, right, things do get a little bit more complicated. If you have a polynomial where the middle term is negative and the last term is positive, let's say, for example, 5x squared minus, I don't know, 16x, and let's see, and plus 55 or something like this. Okay, so if you had this polynomial, you guys, and you were looking to fill in a window, because this piece is negative, but this end piece is positive, they're going to have to multiply to a positive number and add to be a negative number. Okay, so this is a situation, you guys, where in your window, you'd fill in 5x squared, right? You'd fill in 5x squared, you'd fill in 55. And then both of these boxes would actually need to be negative. Okay, they would need to be negative. So we're not going to go through filling this whole one out, but they would need to be negative in both of these boxes and then both of these positive. Negative times negative is a positive, right? So remember that when you have negative here and positive here, both of these boxes are negative. When you have a negative at the end, just one of them is negative, one is positive. If you guys struggle at all with filling in your windows, which I'm going to ask you to do with these polynomials in a worksheet for tomorrow, please reach out to me either by email, phone, or Zoom office hours. And then, like I said, in our next video, we will continue on with taking these full windows and factoring them, taking these and turning them into two sets of parentheses, okay? So if you have questions, please reach out. Otherwise, that is all I have for you in this video, and we will talk to you soon.